Grand Duchess Tatiana Nikolaevna of Russia was the second daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, the last monarch of Russia, and of Tsarina Alexandra. She was born at the Peterhof, St. Petersburg. She was better known than her three sisters during her lifetime and headed Red Cross committees during World War I. Like her older sister Grand Duchess Olga Nikolaevna of Russia, she nursed wounded soldiers in a military hospital from 1914 to 1917, until the family was arrested following the First Russian Revolution of 1917. Her murder by revolutionaries on 17 July 1918 resulted in her being named as a passion-bearer by the Russian Orthodox Church. She was a younger sister of Grand Duchess Olga Nikolaevna of Russia and an elder sister of Grand Duchess Maria Nikolaevna of Russia, Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia and Tsarevich Alexei of Russia. All sisters were falsely rumored to have survived the assassination, and dozens of impostors claimed to be surviving. Roman overseas author Michael Eggler speculated that a woman named Larissa Tudor might have been Tatiana. However, all of the Romanovs, including Olga, Tatiana, Maria and Anastasia, were murdered by the Bolshevik assassination squad. Early life and characteristics. Grand Duchess Tatiana's siblings were Grand Duchesses Olga, Maria, Anastasia, and Tsarevich Alexei of Russia. All of the children were close to one another and to the parents up until the end of their lives. Tatiana was described as tall and slender, with dark auburn hair and dark blue-gray eyes, fine, chiseled features, and a refined, elegant bearing befitting the daughter of an emperor. She was considered the most beautiful of the four Grand Duchesses by many courtiers. Of all her sisters, Tatiana most closely resembled the mother. Tatiana's title is most precisely translated as Grand Princess, meaning that Tatiana, as an imperial highness, was higher in rank than other princesses in Europe, who were royal highnesses. Grand Duchess became the most widely used translation of the title into English from Russian. However, her friends, family and the household servants generally called her by her first name and patronym, Tatiana Nikolaevna, by the Russian nicknames Tanya, Tatya, Tatianochka, or Tanushka. Like the other Romanov children, Tatiana was raised with some austerity. She and her sisters slept on camp beds without pillows, took cold baths in the morning, and were expected to keep themselves occupied with embroidery and knitting projects if they had a spare moment. The work was given as gifts or sold at charity bazaars. According to one story, Tatiana, accustomed to being addressed only by her name and patronymic, was so disconcerted when she was addressed as Your Imperial Highness by Lady-in-Waiting Baroness Sophie Buxhovden when she was heading a committee meeting that she kicked the woman under the table and hissed, "Are you crazy to speak to me like that?" Tatiana and her older sister Olga were known in the household as the Big Pair. Quote, according to the 29th of May 1897 diary entry written by her father's distant cousin, Grand Duke Konstantin Konstantinovich of Russia, she was given the name Tatiana as an homage to the heroine in Alexander Pushkin's novel in verse Eugene Onegin. Her father liked the idea of having daughters named Olga and Tatiana, like the sisters in the famous poem. Like the two younger sisters, the two older girls shared a bedroom and were very close to one another from early childhood. In the spring of 1901, Olga had typhoid fever and was confined to the nursery for several weeks away from her younger sisters. When she began to recover, Tatiana was permitted to see her older sister for 5 minutes but didn't recognize her. When her governess, Margareta Eggler, told her after the visit that the sickly child she had been conversing so gently with was Olga, 4-year-old Tatiana began to cry bitterly and protested that the pale, thin child couldn't be her adored older sister. Eggler had difficulty persuading Tatiana that Olga would recover. French tutor Pierre Gilliard wrote that the two sisters were passionately devoted to one another. Tatiana was practical and had a natural talent for leadership. Her sisters gave her the nickname, the governess, and sent her as the group representative when they wanted the parents to grant a favor. Though she was 18 months Tatiana's senior, Olga had no objection when Tatiana decided to take charge of a situation. She was also closer to her mother than any of her sisters and was considered by many who knew her to be the Tsarina's favorite daughter. Tatiana was the conduit of all her mother's decisions. It was not that her sisters loved the mother any less, recalled her French tutor Pierre Gilliard, but Tatiana knew how to surround her with unwearying attentions and never gave way to her own capricious impulses. Alexandra wrote Nicholas on the 13th of March 1916 that Tatiana was the only one of the four daughters who grasped it when she explained her way of looking at things. Gilliard wrote that Tatiana was reserved and well-balanced but less open and spontaneous than Olga. She was also less talented than Olga, but worked harder and was more dedicated to seeing projects through to completion than her elder sister. Colonel Eugene Kobelinsky, the family's guard at Tsarskoye Selo and Bolsh, felt Tatiana had no liking for art. Maybe it would have been better for her had she been a man. Others felt Tatiana's artistic talents were better expressed in handiwork and in her talent for choosing attractive fashions and creating elegant hairstyles. Her mother's friend Anna Varubova later wrote that Tatiana had a great talent for making clothing, embroidery and crochet, and that she dressed her mother's long hair as well as any professional hairstylist. Relationship with Grigory Rasputin. Tatiana, like all her family, doted on the long-awaited heir Tsarevich Alexei, or baby, who suffered frequent attacks of hemophilia and nearly died several times. Tatiana and her three sisters, like the mother, were all potential carriers of the hemophilia gene. The Tsarina was a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, from whom the trait was inherited. Tatiana's younger sister Maria reportedly hemorrhaged in December 1914 during an operation to remove her tonsils. According to her paternal aunt Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna of Russia, who was interviewed later in her life, the doctor performing the operation was so unnerved that he had to be ordered to continue by the mother, Tsarina Alexandra. Olga Alexandrovna said she believed all four of her nieces bled more than was normal and believed they were carriers of the hemophilia gene like the mother. Symptomatic carriers of the gene, while not hemophiliacs themselves, can have symptoms of hemophilia including a lower than normal blood clotting factor that can lead to heavy bleeding. The Tsarina relied on the counsel of Grigory Rasputin, a Russian peasant and wandering starets or holy man, and credited his prayers with saving the ailing Tsarevich on numerous occasions. Tatiana and her siblings were also taught to view Rasputin as our friend, and to share confidences with him. In the autumn of 1907, Tatiana's aunt Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna of Russia was escorted to the nursery by the Tsar to meet Rasputin. Tatiana and her sisters and brother were all wearing the long white nightgowns. The children appeared to be friendly with Rasputin and comfortable in his company. Rasputin's friendship with the children was also evident in some of the messages he sent to them. In February 1909, Rasputin sent the imperial children a telegram advising them to love the whole of God's nature, the whole of his creation, in particular this earth. The Mother of God was always occupied with flowers and needlework. 11-year-old Tatiana wrote a letter asking Rasputin to visit her and telling him how hard it was to see her mother ill. "But you know, because you know everything," she wrote. However, one of the girls' governesses, Sofia Ivanovna Tyacheva, was horrified that Rasputin was permitted access to the nursery when the four girls were in the nightgowns. She wanted him barred. Rasputin's contacts with the children were, by all accounts, innocent in nature, but Nicholas did ask Rasputin to avoid going to the nurseries in the future. Young Tatiana was aware of the tension in the nursery and afraid of her mother's reaction to Tyacheva's actions. "I'm so afraid that I can speak about our friend something bad," the 12-year-old Tatiana wrote to her mother on the 8th of March 1910. "I hope our nurse will be nice to our friend now." Alexandra eventually had Tyacheva fired. Tyacheva took her book to other members of the family. Nicholas' sister Grand Duchess Tsarina Alexandra.She of Russia was horrified by Tyacheva's story. She wrote in her diary on the 15th of March 1910 that she could not understand the family's regard for Rasputin as almost a saint, when she viewed him as only a list. Tyacheva told her Duchess Tsarina that the Starets visited when Olga and Tatiana were getting ready for bed and sat there talking with them and caressing them. The girls hid his presence from their governess and were afraid to talk to her about Rasputin. Maria Ivanovna Vishnyakova, another nurse for the royal children, was at first a devotee of Rasputin, but later was disillusioned by him. She claimed that she was raped by Rasputin in the spring of 1910. The Empress refused to believe her, Vishnyakova told investigators, and said everything Rasputin did was holy. Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna was told that Vishnyakovan's claim had been immediately investigated, but they caught the young woman in bed with a Cossack of the Imperial Guard. Vishnyakova was dismissed from her post in 1913. It was whispered in society that Rasputin had seduced not only the Tsarina but also the four Grand Duchesses. Rasputin had released ardent, though completely innocent in nature, letters written by the Tsarina and the four Duchesses to him. They circulated throughout society, fueling more rumors. Pornographic cartoons circulated that depicted Rasputin having relations with the Empress, with her four daughters and Anna Varubova nude in the background. Nicholas ordered Rasputin to leave St. Petersburg for a time, much to Alexandra's displeasure, and Rasputin went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Despite the rumors, the imperial family's association with Rasputin continued until Rasputin was murdered in 1916. "Our friend is so contented with our girlies, says they have gone through heavy courses for their age and the souls have much developed," Alexandra wrote to Nicholas on the 6th of December 1916. Tatiana was rumored to have been present at Rasputin's murder on the 17th of December 1916, disguised as a lieutenant of the Chevalier's Guards, so that she could revenge herself on Rasputin, who had tried to violate her. It was also rumored that Rasputin was castrated in front of Tatiana, wrote Maurice Paléologue, the French ambassador to Russia, in his memoirs. Paléologue was skeptical at the time about the truth of the wild rumors and attributed them to the hatred of Rasputin held by people in St. Petersburg. In his memoirs, A. Mordvanov reported that all four Grand Duchesses appeared cold and visibly terribly upset by Rasputin's death and sat huddled up closely together on a sofa in one of the bedrooms on the night they received the news. Mordvanov reported that the young women were in a gloomy mood and seemed to sense the political upheaval that was about to be unleashed. Tatiana attended Rasputin's funeral on the 21st of December 1916, and Rasputin was buried with an icon signed on its reverse side by Tatiana, her mother and sisters. Tatiana later kept a notebook in which she recorded Rasputin's sayings. "Love is light and it has no end. Love is great suffering. It cannot eat, it cannot sleep. It is mixed with sin in equal parts. And yet it is better to love. In love one can be mistaken, and through suffering he expiates for his mistakes. If love is strong, the lover's happy. Nature herself and the Lord give them happiness. One must ask the Lord that he teach to love the luminous bride, so that love be not torment, but joy. Love pure, love luminous is the sun. The sun makes us warm, and love caresses. All is in love, and even a bullet cannot strike love down. Tatiana, like her mother, was deeply religious and read her Bible frequently. She also studied theology and struggled with the meaning of good and evil, sorrow and forgiveness, and man's destiny on earth. She decided that one has to struggle much because the return for good is evil, and evil reigns. A. Mosolov, a court official, felt that Tatiana's reserved nature gave her a difficult character, but one with more spiritual depth than her sister Olga. Her English tutor, Sidney Gibbs, who later became a Russian Orthodox priest, disagreed and felt that religion for Tatiana was a duty rather than something she felt in her heart. Young adulthood and World War I. As a young teenager, Tatiana was assigned a regiment of soldiers, the Voznesensky Hussars, and given the rank of honorary colonel. She and Olga, who was also given her own regiment, would go out and inspect the soldiers regularly, an occasion they greatly enjoyed. When she was nearly 14, an ill Tatiana begged her mother to permit her to get out of bed in time to go to a review so she could watch a soldier she was infatuated with. "I would like so much to go the review of the 2nd Division, as I am also the second daughter and Olga was at the 1st, so now it is my turn," she wrote to Alexandra on the 20th of April 1911. "Yes, Mama, and at the 2nd Division one will see whom I must see, you know whom." While she enjoyed the company of the soldiers she met, the young Tatiana also sometimes found the behavior shocking. A group of officers aboard the imperial yacht gave her older sister Olga a portrait of Michelangelo's nude David, cut out from a newspaper, as a present for her name day on the 11th of July 1911. Olga laughed at it long and hard. The indignant 14-year-old Tatiana wrote to her aunt Grand Duchess Olga Alexandra.She of Russia, and not one of the officers wishes to confess that he has done it. Such swine, aren't they? The 14-year-old found her distant cousin Prince Ioan Konstantinovich of Russia's engagement to Helen of Serbia touching, but found the thought of Helen kissing him hilarious. How funny if they might have children, can be kissing him. Tatiana wrote Olga Alexandrovna on the 14th of July 1911. What foul fie, that fall. The 14-year-old Tatiana experienced her first brush with violence when she witnessed the assassination of the government minister Pyotr Stolypin during a performance at the Kiev Opera House. Tatiana and her older sister Olga had followed the father back to his opera box and witnessed the shooting. Her father later wrote to his mother, Dowager Empress Maria, on the 10th of September 1911, that the event had upset both girls. Tatiana sobbed and both of them had trouble sleeping that night. A few years later, when World War I broke out, Tatiana became a Red Cross nurse with her mother and Olga. They cared for wounded soldiers in a private hospital on the grounds of Tsarskoye Selo. According to Varubova, Tatiana was almost as skillful and devoted as her mother, and complained only that on account of her youth she was spared some of the more trying cases. Valentina Ivanovna Chebotareva, who worked with her at the hospital, described in her journal how she planned to boil silk while Tatiana was otherwise occupied, fearing that Tatiana would be too tired to help her. But Tatiana guessed what Chebotareva was doing. "Why can you breathe carbolic acid and I can't?" she asked Chebotareva, and insisted on helping her with the work. Tatiana was strongly patriotic and apologized in a 29 October 1914 letter for saying something negative about the Germans in her mother's presence. She explained that she forgot her mother had been born in Germany because she thought of Alexandra as only Russian. The Tsarina responded that she did feel completely Russian and Tatiana had not hurt her feelings with her sharp words. But Alexandra was hurt by the actions of her former countrymen and by the gossip she heard about her own German connections. On the 15th of August 1915, Tatiana wrote her mother another letter expressing her desire to help her bear the burdens brought on by the war. "I simply can't tell you how awfully sorry I am for you, my beloved ones. I am so sorry I can in no way help you or be useful. In such moments I am sorry I'm not a man." As Tatiana grew into adulthood, she undertook more public appearances than her sisters and headed committees. Varubova recalled that she became better known to the public than her three sisters because of her attention to duty and her ability to engage those she met. In the memoirs, both her mother's friend, Varubova, and lady-in-waiting Liliden recalled that Tatiana, the most social of the sisters, longed for friends her own age, but her social life was restricted by her rank and her mother's distaste for society. She also had a more introspective side, known only to her closest friends and family. With her, as with her mother, shyness and reserve were accounted as pride, but, once you knew her and had gained her affection, this reserve disappeared and the real Tatiana became apparent. Den recall, she was a poetical creature, always yearning for the ideal, and dreaming of great friendships which might be hers. Chebotareva, who grew to love sweet Tatiana almost like a daughter, described how the shy Grand Duchess once reached out to hold her hand when Tatiana was nervous about walking in front of a large group of nurses. "I am so terribly embarrassed and frightened. I do not know whom I greeted and whom not," Tatiana told Chebotareva. Tatiana's informality also impressed Chebotareva's son, Gregory. Tatiana once called Chebotareva at her home on the telephone and spoke first to her 16-year-old son. Gregory was annoyed when the Grand Duchess referred to him by his diminutive name, Grisha. Not realizing who she was, the affronted Gregory asked the Grand Duchess to identify herself and she replied, "Tatiana Nikolaevna," quote. When he asked her again, still not believing he was talking to a Romanov, Tatiana again failed to claim the imperial title of Grand Duchess and replied that she was Sister Romanova II. On another occasion during the war, when the lady-in-waiting who usually picked them up from the hospital was detained and sent a carriage without an attendant, Tatiana and her sister Olga decided to go shopping for the first time. They ordered the carriage to stop near a group of shops and went into one of the stores, where they were unrecognized because of the nurses' uniforms. They came back out without buying anything when they realized they did not have money with them and wouldn't have known how to use it even if they did. The next day they asked Chebotareva how to use money. Romances with soldiers. Tatiana fell in love on at least one occasion. In an article in the December 2004 edition of the magazine Royalty Digest, a journal of record, Peter de Malama wrote that his cousin, Dmitry Yakovlevich Malama, an officer in the Imperial Russian Cavalry, met Tatiana when he was wounded in 1914 and a romance later developed between Tatiana and the young man when he was appointed an equerry to the court of the Tsar Tsarskoye Selo. Dmitry Malama gave Tatiana a French bulldog she named Ortipo in September 1914. "Forgive me about the little dog," Tatiana wrote to her mother on the 30th of September 1914. To say the truth, when he asked should I like to have it if he gave it to me, I at once said yes. You remember, I always wanted to have one, and only afterwards when we came home I thought that suddenly you might not like me having one. But I really was so pleased at the idea that I forgot about everything. The dog died, but Malama gave her a replacement puppy. Tatiana took it with her to Yekaterinburg, where it died with the rest of the family. Malama paid the imperial family a visit some 18 months after he gave Tatiana the first dog. My little Malama came for an hour yesterday evening, wrote Alexandra to Nicholas on the 17th of March 1916. Looks flourishing, more of a man now, an adorable boy still. I must say, a perfect son-in-law he would have been. Why, a foreign PC's not as nice. Malama was killed in August 1919 while commanding a unit of the White Russians fighting the civil war against the Bolsheviks in the Ukraine. According to Peter de Malama, Tatiana was also fond of an officer named Vladimir Kinadze, whom she cared for when he was wounded in 1915 and again in 1916. According to the diary of Valentina Ivanovna Chebotareva, a nurse who worked with Tatiana during the war, Chebotareva described how Tatiana sometimes sat beside Volodya at the piano as he played a tune with one finger and talked to her in a low voice, wearing a mysterious expression on his face. Chebotareva also described how Tatiana and her sister Olga made excuses to come to the hospital to see Volodya. Chebotareva felt the flirtations between the Grand Duchesses and the wounded officers could cause gossip and damage the girls' reputations. Negotiations for marriage. According to some sources, Serbian King Peter I wanted Tatiana as a bride for his younger son, Prince Alexander. In January 1914, the Serbian Prime Minister Nikola Pasic delivered a letter to Tsar Nicholas in which King Peter expressed a desire for his son to marry one of the Grand Duchesses. Nicholas replied that he would allow his daughters to decide whom to marry, but he noticed that the Serbian Prince Alexander often gazed upon Tatiana during a family dinner. Marriage negotiations ended due to the outbreak of World War I. Tatiana exchanged letters with Alexander during World War I, and Alexander was distraught when he learned of her death.